The glass door of Carter and Sons Manufacturing slammed shut with a force that echoed through the lobby, a sharp crack that rattled the framed portraits of Carter's past, grim, square-jawed men staring down from their black and white perches. Olivia Carter stood just beyond the threshold, her arms wrapped around a cardboard box that felt like an anchor, a chipped, "World's Best Boss" mug from a team gift she'd once laughed off, a stack of notebooks with her tight, meticulous handwriting mapping out 15 years of plans, a faded photo of her first day as head of operations, grinning, naive, her hair still untouched by the gray that now streaked it. As she turned to leave, her eyes snagged on the wall. Her portrait, hung with quiet pride last spring, was gone, replaced by a blank space that stung sharper than the firing itself. Outside, the March wind whipped across the parking lot, biting at her cheeks as she walked, her heels clicking a steady, defiant rhythm against the asphalt. Then came Daniel's voice, cutting through the air like a blade dipped in venom. "Don't even think about poaching our clients, Liv. We've already warned them, told them you're a loose cannon, unstable, a walking liability." She paused mid-step, glancing back just enough to catch his silhouette in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, his tie loosened like he'd already cracked open a victory beer. His smirk was a taunt, daring her to bite back. "Good luck with that, Danny," she muttered under her breath, popping the trunk of her Tesla Model S. The car's sleek black curves gleamed under the gray sky, a silent rebellion against the morning's chaos, a machine too polished for the rusting world she'd just left behind. It had all come apart in the boardroom hours earlier. Her father, Robert Carter, had leaned across the polished mahogany table, his weathered hands gripping its edge, his face carved with suspicion. "A Tesla? On your salary?" His voice was low, each word a jab, his blue eyes, once warm when she was a kid, now cold as steel. "Where's the money coming from, Olivia? What are you hiding?" Before she could draw breath to answer, Daniel had pounced, his grin wide and predatory, like a shark scenting blood. "Embezzlement, Dad. She's been skimming us dry. I've been saying it for months. Look at the books. The numbers don't lie." He slid a folder across the table, pages fanning out like evidence in a courtroom drama. The room had erupted in a storm of whispers. Board members she'd mentored through late-night strategy sessions, executives she'd pulled all-nighters with over coffee and spreadsheets, they all turned on her, their eyes narrowing, lips curling into thin, judgmental lines. No one asked for her side. No one paused to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she'd earned that car another way. Robert had called for a vote, his gavel slamming down with a finality that echoed in her chest. Unanimous. Fired. A security guard, sweaty, stammering apologies, had escorted her out, her keycard confiscated, her dignity left in shredded pieces on the boardroom floor. Now, standing by her Tesla, she felt her phone buzz in her coat pocket. A text from Daniel. "Keycard. Return it. Now." She smirked, her fingers dancing over the screen. "Already in the shredder. Enjoy your day." A beat, then she added. "Say hi to Anderson next week. Tell them I miss them." 3 dots blinked furiously on her screen, then vanished. She could almost see him, brow furrowed, jaw tight, too stubborn to ask what she meant. They had no idea the storm she'd been brewing for months. Friday night, Olivia drove through the city, the Tesla's soft hum a soothing counterpoint to the jagged edges of the day. She pulled into the private garage of her penthouse, rode the elevator to the top floor, and stepped into a space her family couldn't fathom, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a skyline that glittered like a promise kept, minimalist furniture in shades of charcoal and cream, a wine rack stocked with vintages she'd never dared bring to their chip table dinners. "Middle managers don't live like this," Daniel had sneered over a tense Thanksgiving meal months ago, his fork stabbing the air as he chewed dry turkey, his eyes glinting with suspicion. He'd been right. She wasn't a middle manager, not anymore, not ever really. She kicked off her heels, poured a glass of Pinot Noir, and sank into her leather sofa, the cushions molding to her like an old friend. The truth was simpler than they'd ever guess. She was the founder and CEO of Novatech, a tech empire she'd built from nothing over the past decade. It had started with a beat-up laptop in a cramped studio apartment, a single client who'd taken a chance on her supply chain software, and a relentless drive to prove herself, to the father who'd always seen her as second best, to the brother who'd mocked her every step. Now, Novatech was a silent giant, its innovations powering industries across the globe, its profits soaring into the nine figures. 6 months ago, she'd pulled off her boldest move yet, acquiring the Anderson Group, Carter and Son's largest client, the linchpin of their revenue, 60% of it, to be exact. She opened her laptop, the screen casting a soft blue glow across her face as she skimmed the latest financials her assistant, Lily, had emailed. Carter and Sons was a house of cards, over-leveraged, its machinery ancient, its processes stuck in the 20th century. Without Anderson, they'd bleed cash for a year, maybe 2, before the creditors swooped in like vultures. She traced a finger along the numbers, a slow smile tugging at her lips. They'd built their empire on sand, and she held the tide in her hands. Her phone buzzed again. "Daniel, you're dead to us." She stared at the words, a flicker of something, anger, maybe hurt, tightening her chest. She forwarded the message to her lawyer with a note. "File under family drama. Might need this later." Then she took a sip of wine, letting the warmth settle over the ache. They thought they'd crushed her. They were wrong. Monday morning dawned cold and sharp. Olivia dressed with precision. A tailored charcoal Armani suit, a silk blouse the color of storm clouds, heels that clicked like a metronome of power. At Carter and Sons, she'd worn muted blazers and sensible flats to avoid questions. Today, she wanted them to ask. She wanted them to see. Pulling into the company lot, she spotted a handwritten sign taped to her old parking space. "For loyal employees only." She snorted, rolling her eyes as she slid into a visitor slot instead. Real mature, Danny. What's next? A "No girls allowed" sign on the boardroom door? The lobby hushed as she stepped inside, her visitor badge clipped to her lapel like a loaded gun. Olivia Carter, CEO, Novatech. Faces she'd known for years, receptionists who'd shared morning coffee, accountants who'd laughed at her dry jokes, averted their eyes, caught between guilt and confusion. Then Daniel stormed in, his tie askew, his smirk fading as he read her badge, the color draining from his face. "You're bluffing," he choked out, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Call Anderson and check," she said, brushing past him with a flick of her wrist, her heels echoing on the tile. "Or follow me upstairs. The board's waiting." The elevator ride was a study in tension. Daniel's ragged breathing, the soft hum of machinery, the faint, cloying scent of his overpriced cologne. When the doors slid open, the boardroom stretched before them. Same long table, same stiff chairs, same faces that had voted her out 3 days ago. But the air was different now, heavy with unease and the sour tang of desperation. Robert sat at the head, his silver hair mussed, his knuckles white around a chipped coffee mug that read Carter and Sons, Family First. The irony was so thick it could choke you. The board members shifted in their seats, papers rustling like dry leaves in a windstorm, their eyes darting between her and the men who'd once been her family. "What the hell is she doing here?" Robert barked, his voice rough with exhaustion and something darker. Fear, maybe, or the dawning of defeat. Olivia set her briefcase down with a deliberate thud, letting the sound reverberate through the silence. "Good morning, Dad. I'm here representing Novatech, parent company of the Anderson Group. We need to discuss your contract renewal, or, more accurately, why it's not happening." The room went still, then fractured into chaos. "This is a lie," Daniel shouted, slamming a fist on the table so hard a pen rolled off the edge and clattered to the floor. "Anderson's been ours for 20 years. You can't just waltz in and—" "Was yours," Olivia cut in, her tone smooth as polished steel. She slid a stack of folders across the table, each one landing with a soft thwack in front of a board member. "You've coasted on their loyalty while the world moved on. No upgrades, no digital systems, just Grandpa's rusty playbook and a prayer. Anderson's mine now. Robert's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a growl. You set us up. You've been planning this. No, she said, stepping closer, her gaze locking with his unflinching. You did. Firing me was just the cherry on top of a decade of dismissing me, telling me I'd never be good enough, that I didn't have the Carter grit. Well, I've got something better. She reached into her briefcase again, pulling out a second document, thicker than the first, and dropped it onto the table with a heavy slap. Here's the kicker. Novatech owns 51% of Carter and Sons' debt. Bought it last week from that shady lender you've been dodging for months. They practically begged me to take it off their hands, said you were a sinking ship with a loudmouth captain. Their words, not mine. Daniel's jaw dropped, a strangled noise escaping his throat as he stared at the papers. Robert's hands trembled, the mug slipping slightly in his grip, coffee sloshing onto the table in dark, uneven pools. The board erupted into murmurs, executives flipping through the folders, searching for a loophole, a lifeline, anything to claw their way out of the trap she'd sprung. You're stealing our company, Daniel yelled, his face flushed with fury, veins bulging at his temples as he lurched toward her. Stealing. Olivia laughed, a sharp, cutting sound that silenced the room. I'm saving it. Novatech will modernize this dinosaur. New tech, streamlined ops, a real shot at the future. But I'm in charge now. Robert glared, his voice barely above a whisper, rough and broken. And if we say no, you lose, Anderson, default on your debt, and I take it all anyway. She leaned back, crossing her arms with a smirk that dared them to test her. Checkmate, Dad. Just as the board's resolve began to crumble, Daniel surged to his feet, a wild, triumphant gleam in his eye that made her stomach twist. You think you're so smart? I've got a play you didn't see coming, Bergman Industries. Been working them for months behind your back, late nights, secret meetings in dive bars across town. They'll replace Anderson, and we won't need your damn handouts. Olivia's smile faltered for a heartbeat, her mind racing. Bergman? She hadn't pegged Daniel for the type to hustle a side deal. He was lazy, loud, more bluster than brains, or so she'd thought. But those late nights he'd bragged about, the ones she dismissed as bar crawls with his frat boy buddies, had he actually been scheming? For a moment, doubt flickered like a shadow across her confidence. Had she missed something? Had he outmaneuvered her after all? She steadied herself, tilting her head with a calm she didn't fully feel. Nice try, she said, her voice even despite the adrenaline spiking through her veins. Except Bergman's VP called me last night. They're thrilled to partner with Novatech instead. Said your pitch was, and I quote, a PowerPoint from 1995 with clip art and a prayer. Should have updated your game, Danny. The room groaned audibly, a collective exhale of defeat. Daniel's face crumpled, his bravado evaporating like steam off a puddle, his shoulders slumping as he sank back into his chair. Robert buried his head in his hands, muttering something that sounded like a curse, or a prayer. She couldn't tell. The board members exchanged glances, resignation settling over them like a fog. But then Robert looked up, his eyes hollow, his voice rasping through the silence. You're not my daughter anymore. You've got no soul. The words hit her like a punch, dragging up a memory, her at 10, handing him a report card with straight A's, his gruff, good enough, I guess, instead of the praise she'd craved. Her chest tightened, but she masked it with a shrug. Maybe, she said, her tone cool, unyielding. But I've got the company. She slid a pen across the table to him, its metallic clink loud in the stillness. Vote. Now. One by one, hands raised, tentative at first, then resolute. The tally was unanimous. Olivia Carter, once the overlooked daughter, the dismissed sister, was now the undisputed leader. 1 year later, Olivia sat in Robert's old office, the dark mahogany desk now hers, its surface polished to a mirror shine. The walls, once a shrine to Carter family pride, held new photos, Her Novatech team celebrating a product launch in a sleek Silicon Valley warehouse, her signing the Bergman deal in a glass-walled conference room, her cutting the ribbon on a renovated Carter and Sons factory humming with state-of-the-art machinery. The company, rebranded as a Novatech subsidiary, was thriving, its profits climbing faster than even she'd projected, its outdated legacy transformed into a competitive force. Her phone buzzed on the desk, the screen lighting up with a text from Robert. "Dinner tonight. Lasagna, your favorite. Please come." She leaned back in her chair, twirling a pen between her fingers, the motion slow and deliberate. A year ago, they'd branded her a traitor, erased her from their lives, spat her name like a curse. Now they wanted her back, not out of love, but necessity. She'd taken their crumbling empire and turned it into something they'd never dreamed of, a phoenix risen from their ashes. Daniel still worked for her, relegated to sales after a brief firing 6 months back for leaking fake memos in a petty rebellion. She'd rehired him. He was good at schmoozing clients. She'd give him that, but every yes, boss stuck in his throat like a jagged shard of glass. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Lily poked her head in, her dark curls framing a knowing smile. "Going to dinner?" "Maybe," Olivia said, smirking. "Depends if Daniel's learned to say, boss, without choking on it." Lily laughed, leaning against the doorframe, her sharp eyes glinting. "He'll get there.
Or he'll choke trying."
"Either way, I'd pay to see it." She paused, then added, "You sure you're ready for that table again? After everything?" Olivia's smirk softened, her gaze drifting to the window. "I don't know," she admitted, quieter now. "But I'm curious what they'll say when they can't ignore me anymore." That night, she pulled up to the family home in her new Tesla Plaid, sleeker, faster, a quiet flex of her new reality. The scent of lasagna wafted through the air as she stepped inside, warm and familiar, a tether to a past she'd outgrown. Robert greeted her with a stiff nod, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying too many years. Daniel skulked in the corner, nursing a glass of bourbon, his glare cutting through the room like a blade. The table was set with the same chipped plates she remembered from childhood, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Nice car," Robert muttered, avoiding her eyes as he passed her a basket of garlic bread, its edges golden and crisp. "Thanks," she said, taking a seat, her tone light but measured. "Business is good." Daniel snorted, the sound harsh against the clink of cutlery. "Yeah, our business." She caught his glare and held it for a moment, her lips curving into a faint, knowing smile, just enough to remind him who held the reins. The meal unfolded in strained small talk, the lasagna rich and comforting, the garlic bread a quiet nod to better days. But then, as she reached for her glass of water, her eyes met Robert's across the table. For a fleeting second, neither spoke. His gaze softened, not with words, but with something unspoken, a flicker of regret, perhaps, or recognition. He gave a slight nod, almost imperceptible, before looking away. She didn't need to hear it. She felt it, a crack in the wall he'd built between them. After dinner, as she stepped into the foyer to leave, her gaze caught on an old family photo on the mantel, a faded Polaroid from a summer picnic decades ago. She was 6, gap-toothed and grinning, perched on Robert's shoulders while Daniel chased a frisbee nearby. Her mother, long gone, stood in the background, her laugh frozen in time. Olivia paused, her fingers brushing the frame. For a moment, she was that girl again, desperate for her father's pride, her brother's camaraderie. Could she forgive them? Did she even want to? She smiled, soft and private, and turned away. Back in her Tesla, she didn't drive home. She headed to the office instead, the city lights streaking past like memories she could choose to keep or let go. Parking in her reserved spot, unmarked now, no petty signs, she stepped into the building, the hum of late-night work greeting her like an old friend. She walked to her desk, sat down, and opened her laptop. The numbers glowed on the screen, Carter and Sons, stronger than ever. Her triumph wasn't just in the victory over them, it was in the woman she'd become, steady and whole, beyond their reach. Then her phone buzzed again. "Lily, Check your email. Urgent. Olivia frowned, opening her inbox. A leaked memo stared back at her. Daniel's name scrawled at the bottom in his messy, arrogant script. She's not invincible. I've got proof Novateka's next deal is a house of cards. Overvalued contracts, shaky partners. Time to take her down. Attached was a blurry photo, a man she hadn't seen in years, his face half-shadowed, standing outside that first studio apartment where Novatek was born. Her first client, the one who'd vanished after a screaming match over missing funds she'd buried deep in the company's early books, a secret she'd thought was dead. Her breath caught, her pulse hammering in her ears. Daniel wasn't done. And this time, he might have the weapon to unravel everything she'd built. Olivia's empire stands tall, but a ghost from her past could bring it crashing down. Will Daniel finally outplay her, or will she bury him again? Hit subscribe and don't miss the next chapter of this high-stakes showdown, where betrayal cuts deep and the game's just heating up.
Click now